Right, good morning and thank you very much. You may think it's quite a quantum leap to move from what Paul's been talking about for the last 20 minutes, contaminated land, to why am I standing here talking about green space? Now what I'll say to start is, I'm talking about green space. I'm not talking about land that's never been developed. I'm talking about green space as an end product of a land process. That green space could be brownfield land. It might be greenfield land that's now being used in a different way. But I want to make that clear to begin with. Because I think one of the big challenges we've got is, over the last probably decade, land use has been very polarised. If it's brownfield, you've got to reuse it, you've got to build as many apartments on it as you possibly can. If it's greenfield, it's got to be protected at all costs. Well, sorry, I don't subscribe to that, and I think we should have a proper debate about what the best use of land is to create sustainable communities and sustainable society. Because sometimes the brownfield land is actually in completely the wrong place to redevelop. It's in the completely right place to reuse for community by creating good quality green space. A lot of work we do as a Land Restoration Trust is in former coalfield areas. The former collieries were at the centre of communities. The whole community surrounded where the collieries were and were very introspective. They looked in on the sites. It's where everyone lived, worked, played. They didn't go out of the communities very much. But when you come to regenerating those communities, actually, in many cases, the last place you need to build the new homes or the new factories is on those colliery sites. Because precisely because of the design of those communities, all you tended to get going into those sites were the railway lines to bring out the coal. What you didn't have was the good connections to the road network, to other areas. So sometimes, actually, the best place to develop your new development around those communities was on the edges of the communities. But what you had to do then is restore the brownfield so that it did something for the community. So what I want to look at today is open space. Green space, is it a resource or is it a liability? The perceived view I get is that it's a liability. Green space, yeah, it's nice to have, but it's not worth anything. It's a problem to us. If you create green space, well, you've got to manage it. It's not valuable like selling a bit of land for new housing or new factories. It doesn't create a positive value. I'm a chartered surveyor by background, so you're trained to think in valuation terms. A hectare of land for housing is worth £1 million or £500,000. A hectare of land for open space, well, in strict valuation terms, it's not worth very much. Therefore, it can't be worth much to society. Well, actually, I think that's a completely wrong view. It's not a priority. If you look at most local authorities and the way they're driven in their priorities, managing open space, whether it's former brownfield or whether it's new green infrastructure, is not a priority. When budgets get cut, the first budgets that get cut are the grass-cutting budgets, if that's not too much like a conundrum there. But the first thing that's looked at, oh, well, if we stop cutting the grass and tidying the litter weekly and do it every 2 weeks, it doesn't really matter. Well, as a surveyor, the first thing we're trained is the mantra location, location, location. And what creates a location and the value of that location, the attractiveness of that location, but the public environment. It's a Cinderella service looking after open space. It's the last thing we want to do, isn't it? It's a bit of land that's left over. Oh, well, I suppose it will have to be open space because we can't flog it to make some money. And that's the last problem. Well, it's costly to maintain. It doesn't produce anything, does it? You can't build 50 houses on it. You can't build a factory on it. It doesn't produce anything. We don't subscribe to that theory at the Land Restoration Trust. We don't subscribe to the theory that it's hard to quantify the benefits. We think you can quantify the benefits. You just have to take a different approach. Don't treat it as a valuation like valuing a bit of land. Value it from a societal point of view. What is that bit of land as open space, former brownfield land? What's it worth to the community? How do you measure that? Well, there are ways to measure it that are being developed. I was struck recently by a bit of valuation work that had been done for a local authority, a very well-known park in the northwest of England, and it appeared on the council's asset register as being worth £1. and it appeared as a liability because it cost a lot of money to maintain every year. The council decided to take a fresh look at that liability and said, well, what have we got on this park? We've got these trees that are 50 years old, 100 years old, and there are actually ways of valuing trees, believe it or not. It was news to me as a valuer, but there is valuation advice on how to do that. You can value trees. You can value the open space in different ways to society. And that bit of land that appeared as a liability in the value of £1 suddenly appeared as an asset worth £4 million on the council's balance sheet. And suddenly the people with the purse strings suddenly said, hang on a second, you mean this is worth £4 million and we don't look after it? Oh, hallelujah, you know, great. Suddenly someone's realised open space has a value more than just pounds, shillings and pence. It's seen as a liability, not an asset. We think it's actually a resource, as I say. We think that well-managed public open space is a catalyst for economic regeneration. Why do companies go to invest in an area? Why do people go and live in an area? It's back to that location, location, location. It's the quality of the environment, isn't it? You don't sort of suddenly decide as a company, I need 20,000 square feet of office space. I don't care what it looks like round about, I just want an office. You think, well, I've got to bring my clients here. I've got to win business. I want good quality workforce. Well, what attracts clients? The environment. What attracts the workforce? The environment. What attracts people to stay as your workforce? The quality of the environment around that facility. So, oh, hang on, it's got a value, hasn't it? It promotes social cohesion. Those very coalfields that were seen as blots on landscape in coalfields, once they've been restored as open space, they're actually the place the community values most. Most of the community grew up in coalfields, working on those sites, down the pits, working in the miners' offices, the NUM offices, the NCB offices. They congregated there for work. They congregated there for play. The NUM, the NCB ran the sports pitches. They ran the community facilities. So people naturally gravitated to those sites. So now they've been restored as open space. They are naturally the focus for those communities. The tremendous amount of activity that happens on our sites in those communities is testament to that. They do imply that environmental improvement. And linked to that is sort of health improvement as well. There is plenty of research. Paul talked about his favourite Tom Clancy books, Write It Down and It Proves It. You know, if you don't write it down. There's oodles of research, to use a technical term, that good quality environment is a positive benefit for health. If you open your windows, your curtains every morning and look out on a derelict site, it has been proven to have a negative effect on your mental health, and it's also proven to have a negative effect on your physical health. So if it's got those negative effects, if it's derelict, it stands to reason that if it's not derelict, it must have some positive benefits. And it does. And as I say, there's a tremendous amount of research proving that. It's a catalyst for economic regeneration. It increases property value. It increases property value. Why? Well, because people want to come and live there. They want to build their factories there. They want to invest there. We had a case, Bold Colliery in the northwest was restored many years ago with groundwork. Great. A study was done showing how property prices had gone up in the region, in the area of the colliery, precisely because you've got a good bit of well-managed open space. There was a downside in that one or two local councils then complained that the local population couldn't now afford to buy the houses, but you know, you can't win everything. But actually it was a place people wanted to go and live. So there is some value there. It improves the image, that location factor. It makes it somewhere you want to go to. It attracts economic development and investment. It encourages people to go there. It encourages tourism. Parks, open spaces. People go there. They want to use them. If you look at some of the forest parks that have been created by the Forestry Commission, the Forest Trusts over the years, they encourage people to go there and spend money. It creates jobs. There is research that shows that people work in a good environment are more likely to stay, 3 times more likely to stay in that employment than in more derelict areas. So if you restore brownfield land to open space, there are values to business. What's the value to business? Well, you don't have to retrain staff, you don't have to re-recruit staff, you don't have that constant turnover that's destabilising. So again, there's a value. How do you attribute it? A quote here from a tenant of a factory neighbouring one of our sites in Staffordshire, Keys Business Park in Cannock. You know, it's more than just a nice thing. It has benefit. They recognise to their company that they attract employees to theirs because the former brickworks around their site's been restored as good quality open space. It may have been brownfield, but it didn't mean it had to be built on. That social cohesion that I talked about, it's the place people can meet, people can walk their dogs. Paul referred to it in his presentation. If you've got a bit of good quality open space on your doorstep, well managed, looked after, and there's activity, it encourages you to come out of your house, walk the dog, walk the kids, exercise, all these positive benefits. So there are values. It's that focal point. It's, you know, historically we had village greens where people met. Let's use the bits of brownfield land for the benefits to society. It's an educational resource. We've got figures later in the presentation showing how many people have used our sites for formal educational reasons, getting local communities active. There's research, again, back to the health agenda, that woodlands can promote the development of young children going for walks in open space, so it's got a real educational and health benefit to them. There's research that shows that well-managed open space has a positive effect on reducing crime. It reduces antisocial behaviour. If cars aren't left burnt out, if rubbish isn't left, if it's picked up, then people won't do it. It's almost it's the option that was pursued in New York. You know, you kill the most low level of crime. If you stop that, you stop it escalating. I have a theory that, you know, most regeneration wouldn't actually be necessary if we just actually looked after the places we created in the first place. Because regeneration becomes necessary because we allow a place to deteriorate and degenerate. If you stop picking up litter, if you stop cleaning up the graffiti, if you stop dealing with the antisocial behaviour, people who can move out of an area and people who can't get stuck there and they lock themselves behind their doors. It's an opportunity to engage with disaffected young people. We run on some of our sites in Yorkshire, we run forest schools. There's kids who've been excluded from schools for arson. It seems crazy, but the Forestry Commission, who manage sites for us, run training on there to teach some of these kids how to responsibly light fires in woodlands. So they teach them how to go and chop down bits of trees that need chopping down and how to light a fire. It works wonders in stopping those kids going and setting fire to schools. As I say, it sounds crazy, but it works. It's that environmental improvement and the links to sustainability. Green cover reduces surface temperature in the hottest areas. More trees, 10% green cover keeps the maximum temperature down. But the other side, do away with that green cover and temperatures will rise. It alleviates flood risk. Open space, restoring brownfield land in a city will help with climate change problems. It will create a soak-away area for rainwater. We're told this is all going to be a problem, climate change. Well, here's a solution. Instead of building another 100 flats on that bit of brownfield land in an urban area, clean it up and use it as green space. It will not only help the community, it will help with climate change, it will help sustainability of a community. It improves the biodiversity. Some of the brownfield sites in the country, they may be seen as being horrible, nasty, but actually the amount of biodiversity, because they've been allowed to grow wild. Many of you probably here, I think most consultants who are here in the NEC today have been involved at one time in their life on the Avenue Coking Works project in Chesterfield. Avenue Coking Works is considered one of the most polluted sites in the UK, it's costing government about £170 million to clean up 90 hectares of land. It's about £2 million a hectare. When you look at the biodiversity on that site, we've got more newts than we could start a newt exportation business from that site. We've got grass snakes, we've got owls. We've actually discovered bats nesting in some of the drainage channels. We've got kingfishers. But it's a polluted site. Nature has adapted to it. The amount of wildlife and biodiversity there is fantastic. So how do we manage that site to capture that and not just build something new on it? It's safe, sustainable transport routes. If you've got a bit of brownfield land in the middle of a community and you create good footpaths across that, cycle tracks across that, you've created ways for people to commute. And back to the health agenda. Vitamin G, as it's been named, the green bit. If you look at the cost of physical inactivity, £8.2 billion a year. 20% of 4-year-olds overweight. Heart disease, the cost of that to society. Again, green space has been proved to improve physical health. Some statistics there. What does this point to? Using open space in communities. If you've got a deprived community and some brownfield land, just don't stick up new factories on it. Maybe to society it's got more value as open space for that community as another block of flats. Fitness, walking. We run green gyms on our sites, getting people out active on our sites with the primary care trusts. Mental health I talked about earlier. Going for a walk has been proven to reduce mental ill health, reduces stress, blood pressure. So there's all these positive benefits of using that bit of brownfield land as green space. But the big question is, how do you value it? If you haven't got a valuation that says it's worth £1 million, well, it can't be worth something. We did some research. Paul Nathaniel's team at Nottingham University helped us do research, and we looked at the valuation. We looked at values of use for education. We looked at value for use for fitness, and we got some good figures out of it. The counterside to what I was talking about was that if you don't look after these places, they cost society money. They encourage antisocial behaviour. They encourage people to dump cars, set fire to things, dump rubbish. So there is a cost to society of not doing things. There is a negative cost and it affects mental health. It creates barriers in communities. If you've got a bit of derelict land, do you want to walk over that? I had a discussion with someone earlier about Liverpool Garden Festival. 25 years of dereliction there. There's a tremendous walkway along the front of the Liverpool Garden Festival by the Mersey. It's a fantastic walkway, but I think we agreed earlier we wouldn't necessarily want to walk there unescorted because you've got this barrier of derelict land between the road and the riverfront. It's a barrier. Let's change that. Let's move that. Looking on this land, it stops people using it because they're frightened of it. We need to change that. It's a blight on community. It reduces property values. So you've got all these negatives. So there has to be a positive value in using that land. And it does undermine. Do you really want to tell someone, bring someone to where you live if you've got this lump of derelict rubbish site sitting on your doorstep? No, you don't. And it reduces that property value. There are a few more slides here. Liverpool Garden Festival, as I say here. Yellow submarine that now somehow it managed to sail down the Mersey a bit and is now parked in front of Liverpool Airport. We'll be starting to reclaim it soon as well as the site. The site's lain derelict 25 years now. It cost £25 million to clean up, but no one bothered looking after it after it's been cleaned up. Tremendously successful. Restoration's now started on that, so we'll get it back in use. It's going to cost another £10 million to bring it back into use for the community. Fantastic, isn't it? Spend that money and then don't manage it. Our solution, make sure if you're going to turn brownfield into greenfield for public benefit, look after it when you do it. Because if you don't look after it, there are all these negative effects on communities. We act as a strategic landholding body. We're taking on Liverpool Garden Festival site with a stream of funding through the North West Development Agency and through a private sector developer. We're finally getting that site 25 years on into management. It's about time. But we act that strategic way and work with local communities. One of our partners in the trust is Groundwork. We don't claim to know about community cohesion, community work, empowering, enabling communities, but partners like Groundwork can get that bottom-up community activity in a site that lets communities own those sites without having the liabilities. We have the liabilities, the community have the benefits. Our solution, if possible, when we've taken on coalfields, we've taken a lump sum investment. We invest it, we pay, the interest we earn pays for long-term management. It's a very simple equation. We're doing that with Liverpool Garden Festival. It could have been done 25 years ago, and all the benefits that site would have brought. It's far more cost effective. It saves that reinvestment. A couple of £1 million banked 25 years ago for the Liverpool Garden Festival would have secured that site for the community forever. Now it needs another £10 million to bring it back into use, and it still needs that £2 million to provide the management. So is that beneficial? I'm running out of time here, so I'll just rush through this. We look very much at site-specific costing. Every site's different. We look not only at the annual maintenance costs, cutting grass, litter picking, but if there's a bridge we need to replace, if there's structures we need to replace, when do they need to get replaced? How do you fund the replacement of those? There's no point spending 25 million of public money, or anybody's money, creating something like Liverpool Garden Festival if you're not going to look after it. You don't build a building and then leave it to rot for 25 years before thinking, oh, I must repair it. It's too late. You need to demolish it. You need to rebuild it. You manage that building. You paint your windows, your window frames. You repair the roof as you go along. Just because it's open space doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. Our portfolio at the moment, 20 sites, 700 hectares under management. We'll be up to about 1,000 hectares over the next 2 to 3 months. We are about, it's slide so out of date, we've now got about £52 million in our investment portfolios. We've got another 8 sites close to transfer, so you gather a couple of those have transferred while I've been speaking, almost. 200 sites. I can remember having discussions with our friends in Whitehall many years ago, getting the trust up and running. Oh, there's no land, there's no brownfield land that needs managed. We want to build houses on it all. Well, in the first couple of years of operation, we identified with partners over 25,000 hectares of land that, funnily enough, is a blight on communities, but you can't build houses on it. So I think there is a problem there, and it's a problem that it's brownfield, it can't be developed, but it has value for other uses, not just for houses. So we're all about, as I say, added value. Over the last 3 years, we've had over 15,000 people on health activities on our sites. Some of the work Paul's team did at Nottingham is helping us capture value to that. What value is it? Where we looked at educational visits, 14,000 educational visits, we worked out that, I think, I can't remember the exact figure, but I think we worked out that a half hour's educational visit organised for a primary school, year 7, year 6, year 7 pupil was worth something like £6 to the education budget. So it might cost me money managing that site, but it's actually worth something to the education budget. Our ambitions for the future, well, from our own selfish point of view, we'll have 10,000 hectares under management by 2020. But the bigger ambition is that finally, someone, somewhere, Paul talked about the different party manifestos, someone somewhere needs to recognise that brownfield land in communities is valuable precisely because it's brownfield and precisely because it's in the middle of communities and not just because it can be built on. Thank you very much.